Hi, I'm Brandon,
And I'm Mom.
and welcome back here to Tansson Talks TV.
Yes, thank you for joining us again today.
Yeah, and Mom, I hope that you are doing well today.
I am doing well, Brandon. It was a great day outside today, and I am doing well. How about yourself?
Yeah, all is well here. And Mom, can you share with our viewers what show are we speaking about here today?
Yes, today we're going to talk about Maude.
Yes, I'm very excited for us to speak about it. Maude is a television sitcom that aired from September of 1972 to April of 1978, with 6 seasons in its run. The series was a spin-off of All in the Family and was produced by Norman Lear and Bud Yorkin Productions. This episode is titled Maude's Problem and debuted as the series premiere on September 12th of 1972.
All right, sounds good, Brand. Let's see. And let me give a little bit of introduction about this first episode. And we're once more talking about the premiere episode. Um, in this particular episode, Maud is home with her husband, and she is actually waiting for her adult daughter to come home. Her daughter's name is Carol. Um, Carol does come home. She's wearing dark glasses when she walks in the house, and Maud questions the dark glasses. She later finds out through a lot of discussion that her daughter has been crying. And so Maud wants to know what is going on. Why is her daughter crying? And then, with a lot of other discussion, she finds out that her daughter is seeing a therapist. This does not appeal to Maud. She doesn't like the idea that her daughter is going to a therapist. And so Ma takes it upon herself on the next day to go visit her daughter's therapist. And she just kind of invites herself there. She sits in the waiting room. She kicks out the person who was waiting for her appointment, and she just kind of walks on in because now it's an empty appointment and sees this therapist. Um, she goes in and she speaks. Of course, the therapist can say very little about her daughter, but Maud just kind of prods a little bit, and at the end, Maud is the one who ends up speaking to the therapist also. Overall, Carol, her daughter, does tell Maud, she does tell her that she does not have memory between the ages of 3 and 10. This is one of the reasons why she is actually going to see a therapist. But I'm sure there are other reasons that will be explored later in the series. But that is the one thing that she does tell her mother. And so it kind of ends with both of them. They've had a discussion about them both seeing a therapist. And it kind of ends at that. And you'll have to watch the episode to see everything else that kind of goes on.
Well, Mom, thank you so much for that synopsis.
You are welcome, Brandon.
Yeah, and you can follow right through for your top 10 list.
All right, for my top 10 list for this show, once more, just talking about the premiere show, I need to give just a little background and as to say that I did not watch Maude on a regular basis. And so this first episode really is just my thoughts and what I think is important, or what Brandon and I thought were important during this first episode. This is what we figured out. We know that we find out this episode that Maude has been married 4 times. Um, she does have a daughter whose name is Carol. She also has a grandson, and apparently both of them live with Maud. Maud's daughter is divorced. Um, we know that Maud is opinionated and does not mind telling people what she believes or what she thinks. Um, we They do talk about a few political things, and so I'm getting the impression that maybe political things might be something that could perhaps go on for other episodes, but at least in this episode they do have a couple things that they say. Her current husband, his name is Walter, and Walter kind of tolerates Maud and has jokes. So Walter, to me, after watching this episode, was a little bit of comic relief, and so he kind of, he made me laugh. And then we know that Carol's dad was husband number two for Maud, and Maud makes the comment that she stayed married 2 months longer than she probably should have. Um, we also get the impression that Maud might have a little money, and I cannot remember the exact statement that she said, but it was just enough to make you think that Maud had a little bit of money, or I should say more than a normal person. We also kind of know that Maud has an up and down relationship with her daughter. And that's kind of just a little bit of back and forth that they go through. You kind of realize that they do have an up and down relationship. And we also know that Carol needs therapy. And apparently Maude must need it too, since she was there that first episode. She went that first episode. And so, Brandon, those are the 10 things that I picked up from really just watching this first episode of Maude.
Well, yeah. Well, Mom, thank you so much for your top 10 list.
You are welcome, Brandon.
Yeah, and in evaluating this a little bit further, so in this episode, we're introduced to the character of Maude, a strong woman who very clearly speaks her mind and prefers for life to kind of revolve around her. And we can see that while Maude is a strong supporter of mental health, for instance, at least through her words, she's very hypocritical in that she believes her daughter Carol, seeing a psychiatrist, that's something that she disapproves of. And so also, despite this being a spin-off series, this series premiere did not have any meaningful connections to its parent show, All in the Family, and entirely stands on its own. And an item to note is that while the series premiere is not a pilot episode, as Maude had a backdoor pilot on All in the Family, is that while the theme song listed numerous different cast members, we're only introduced to three of the primary cast members in this episode, that being Maude, her fourth husband Walter, and her daughter Carol. But yeah, I mean that's overall, like I said, my quick analysis, and I'm excited for us to head into our discussion.
All right, Brandon.
Yeah, and so I guess to start off, so Mom, I know you spoke about this just briefly a little bit earlier, but how much of Maude have you seen?
I have seen barely any episodes, Brandon. This first episode is probably the first one I've sat through all the way through. I have seen some bits and pieces because it does come on, one of the TV stations, but yeah, but I've seen some bits and pieces over the course of the years, but not anything consistent that I can really talk about. Um, I didn't know that she had a daughter named Carol, but I didn't know if that was her only child. I vaguely remember her grandson. I could not visualize him right now. I do know that Esther Roll was a character on there, and that she did, of course, go on as the spinoff series and played on Good Time, Florida Evans on Good Time. But like, kind of like you mentioned, Esther Roll was not in the first episode, although she was in the theme song, and her name was listed as a main character. Um, so back and forth, I do not remember much about the show, so I have to take this particular show based upon the first episode that we watched.
Yeah, and I also have not really seen much of Maude. This is probably the first episode I've seen all the way, through. I have seen most of one other episode, a couple months ago, but that's about it for me. Aside from bits and pieces, and I mean, but despite all that, though, I am extremely familiar with the theme song of it, though.
Yes, I absolutely love the theme song. It's catchy. I give it an 8.5 or a 9 because it just stands out. And when they do the last part where they talk about Maud very quickly, it seems like that is her personality.
Yeah, it very much is, and yeah, and I mean, overall, thinking about this episode, though, I found it really interesting that they decided to only focus it on, like I said, these three characters, and so I guess Maud in her very brief inner circle.
Yeah, you're very correct about her very brief inner circle, and once you and I did know about All in the Family, but you're right, there was no connection at all in the first episode. To kind of link the shows together. It to me this whereas normally we talk about shows that have a purpose for beginning, this one was just there wasn't a purpose for beginning. It just occurred. So I guess it'll be interesting to see the second or third episode to see if they just slowly bring in the other characters that they claim is well that we know they're in the series because I have seen some of them pop up on the bits and pieces that I've seen.
Yeah, and so one thing that I know that we can say is that even though they weren't in this episode, we are familiar with some of the the other actors that appear later, like you mentioned, like the connection with Good Times there, and of course being a spinoff of All in the Family, it itself had numerous different spinoffs and was probably one of the you know maybe even one of the first series, at least by the 1970s, to really have this many spin-offs and spin-offs of spin-offs and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and then we know that Conrad Bain played in there also, who of course went on to different strokes later, and then Rue McClanahan, which we know from the Golden Girls and Mama's Family.
Yeah, and definitely mentioning too that of course Beatrice Arthur, who plays Maude, also was one of the leads in the Golden Girls as well.
Yes, yes, interesting connection, and that's Brandon. One of the shows we've talked about, the Golden Girls.
Yeah, that is quite true. But going back a little bit to the show though, so what was your overall thoughts about this first episode here?
Actually, Brandon, it was funnier than I thought it would be. I was really rather amused. The comedy was very quick. It was done, I thought, really well for you know for laughing purposes. I mean, we did laugh during the episode, and so for the comedy purposes, it I thought it did really well. I thought, it's very obvious the show was dated, but overall, I thought the show was I thought it was well done.
Yeah, I definitely think it is well done. Yeah, as well. And yeah, it's so interesting though that some of their topics of discussion, even though it is dated, some of the stuff does still hold up today in regards to some of that conversation though. So I mean, it's one of the things interesting looking at this in 2024.
hmm Yeah, it is interesting to look at this year and realize that some things that that were kind of discussed, they do talk about today, but also keeping in mind that the information in there was very dated, that that was occurred during that time period.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, and overall, what are your thoughts about the character of Walter, Maud's fourth husband?
I thought Walter was comic relief. He really was. He kind of kept things going. Even though he might be I guess that'd be the second stepfather for Carol, I guess. But it seemed like they had a good relationship with each other, and I like that they were kind of had like this family mealtime together, even though the grandson was missing. But they had this family mealtime together, in which I guess they were able to talk about what was going on. But it's like they had that down. So I thought Walter was a, a good character.
Yeah, and what's funny though is whereas Maud and Carol, I think like whereas we already identify Maud as someone who definitely speaks her mind, wants everything to sort of be her way.
hmm
Carol to her own extent wants to show that she can take care of herself to her mother, but whereas both of them are definitely stronger characters, that Walter is like the opposite, but yet he can sort of match up to Maud's temperament, so to speak.
Yeah, I think they're both pretty even tempered. So that is right, Brandon.
But yeah, and I mean, in overall though, like sort of questions would you have going into the rest of the series?
Well, I kind of would like to know the mother daughter relationship. Was this just a one time thing that was going on, or is this something that kind of carries over, meaning with the therapy and things like that? We've got this missing grandson. I mean, how old is this child? We don't know how old this person is. We never saw him. So, and what kind of relationship does he have with everyone else? Carol's living at home. So, does she have a job? What does she do? We don't know what Maud does either. And so and well, I guess in that fact, we don't know what Walter does either. But just kind of curious, what do they do on the outside, life of their house? And so I guess we know that they have friends that come in later. So I guess the relationship with them. So yeah, so I mean, it's a show, but we don't know quite what the purpose of the show is at this point in time.
Yeah, and yeah, and I guess for the in terms of the rest of the cast members, it makes me wonder too where exactly they fit into all of this. Like, are all of them introduced in a later episode, like an episode two from now? Are do they all just come in, or is it simply where they've always been around? They just happen to not be here today. So I wonder how that plays in. And I have read, that. there are several episodes throughout the series that have very minimal cast members. And so
Hmm.
I'd be curious to see, how that dynamic plays out, because I know, a lot of shows tend to stick to like their core group. So
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to see if there are more episodes like this that have just such a small cast, but yet works very effectively.
Yeah, and then from my understanding, I think that Maude has several episodes out there that are also kind of controversial episodes that we won't talk about here, but because we have not seen them. But I do know that some of them are out there, so it'll be interesting to kind of see what the time period thought of their different episodes that are kind of out there.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, Maud definitely is a very groundbreaking show, and it would be interesting to see and watch, the series as it progressed, from the 1970s, and like I said, evaluating it now over 50 years later.
Oh, Brandon, 50 years later, huh? Brad. And we talked a little about some of the connections that we had. Um, we do kind of like we said we've already talked about the Golden Girls, and then it's Norman Lear production. What other Norman Lear shows have we done, Brand?
Yeah, so Norman Lear has had quite a few, different production studios, and so for the ones of this time, we would have seen his work in One Day at a Time that we have recently spoken about, and so there's countless other shows that he has had influence on or what his company's done, but definitely, One Day at a Time that just came out 3 years after this.
Okay, alrighty.
Yeah, and I will note too that, and so in addition to Norman Lear, we've also spoken about Bud Yorkin, and we know him as one of the primary producers of What's Happening.
Okay, yeah, we just talked about what's happening, and I guess the overall question is: would we watch this again? Would you watch another episode, Brandon?
I definitely think so, and yeah, I mean, I'm really curious to see, like I said, how the rest of the series progresses, and and how certain episodes tackle certain topics and everything. And I don't know if it would necessarily be like a regular viewing per se. There's definitely a lot on my plate for viewing. As much as I'd love to watch every show in existence, but yeah, I would definitely watch some future episodes. And Mom, what about you?
I think I'd like to watch maybe the second or third episode. And I say that to say is I'm kind of want to see how some of these other characters kind of fit in, what relationship they have with Maud. Are they just kind of like you mentioned, are they just abstract people who are just show up, or are they people who maybe they're related to her? I don't know. So it would be interesting to see how these other characters kind of fit in.
Yeah, and actually, I'd like to see how the show ends, actually. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times, like, we see, like I said, the beginning of the show start off with an initiating event that changes everything. And especially, like, for a lot of family shows, for instance, they might have children, and as they grow up and get older, that's also how the show can end. But because Maud already has an older child and there's not really any initiating event, I'm curious to see how the show progresses, and if it's with just Maud and her views that evolve, or or what is it exactly that allows it to end? Did it even get a proper ending? Those are some things I'd like to know a little bit more of and to find out in viewing.
Yeah, we may have to watch the last episode, take a look to see.
But yeah, but mom, like I said, I really enjoyed our discussion here of Maud.
I enjoyed it too, Brandon. It was kind of a refreshing show to watch. So can't wait to see what we tackle for next week. So for those people who are interested and if there's certain shows you want us to look at, please put it in the comments. If you have other things to say about Mod, put that in the comments also.
Yeah, definitely. I hope that, like I said, that you continue tuning in with us every week. And Mom, I always appreciate being able to speak with you.
Yep, I enjoy speaking with you too, Brandon. Hope all of y'all have a wonderful day.
We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye bye.